Well, if we're using most of our brain to solve coding problems and attend silly stand-up meetings and talk about requirements and troubleshoot problems, how sharp and how on your mind do you think your brain is going to be about making sure it keeps on top of that you make time for your partner and you do meaningful things together? If you've ever been in a committed relationship, you've probably had your partner at one point be like, what the hell? When are you going to get off the computer? And that's a dilemma almost everybody is familiar with, but there's actually some other aspects of trying to maintain a healthy relationship in a tech job that people don't talk about as much, but are just as dangerous if you want to stay in it long term. Well, I've been married for over 25 years to the same woman. It's been a long and arduous road. There have been many times where we've been at danger of splitting up, but we got through it, and I was working in tech and as a programmer this entire time. And so today I'd like to share with you some of the things I've learned that I hope will help you avoid the mistakes I've made in my relationship that almost cost me it, and help keep you out of a situation where you look back and go, man, I really blew it. Here at Healthy Software Developer, I talk about 4 things: career progression, working healthy, finding purpose and meaning in your work, and escaping the corporate grind. This episode is specifically meant to help you find purpose and meaning in your life and in your work. And personally, I can't find many other ways to find as much purpose and meaning in your life as being married. Now, today with OnlyFans and the red pill movement and all the stuff that you'll find on YouTube and elsewhere, being married is more in some ways controversial than ever. The divorce rates are higher than they've ever been. And so you might be thinking, why bother get married if you're not? And if you are married, you may be thinking, I don't know how long this can last. Well, let me help you out today by just giving you some very practical things that you can look out for in your own relationship or marriage if you're working a tech job. And if you find these problems, you can see them as a warning sign that you need to do something and deal with it if you want things to stay healthy. And then in the back half of the video, I want to just give you 3 really practical ways that you can do some things that I've learned really make the difference in keeping that relationship going. The first way working in tech can actually sabotage your relationship if you're not careful is really long, unpredictable work hours. This is going to be no surprise to you if you've been working in tech for a while, but one of the biggest problems that I think I encountered in my marriage, and some of the men and women that I coach through career coaching will come to me for help with, that affects their relationships, is they really cared about each other when they first met, maybe when they were first dating, maybe they eventually got married and their marriage was healthy for the first couple years. But after a while, just the nature of tech work, and especially if you're a developer and you have to estimate, we know that unpredictable things will happen. And sometimes we get pressured to work overtime and to basically sacrifice not only our work-life balance, but our time for our partner. And as embarrassed as I am to say this, another big problem that can happen as a result of these really long work hours and the unpredictable nature of tech is you can get into things that should be more meaningful in your relationship becoming transactional. And let me explain what this means. A transactional relationship is one where it's like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. And I will tell you, after 25 years of marriage, one of the biggest things that will kill any attraction or appreciation between you and your partner is when they see a transactional relationship in the way that you treat them. And what that means is like you agreeing to spend time with them if they'll do something for you, or like them agreeing to have sex if you'll do some other thing. I will tell you in full transparency, when I was on some really difficult projects and I hardly had any time to spend with my wife, for example, I would still want to sleep with her, and she would feel like, what the hell? I have no connection with you. We never spend any time together. And, even though as a man, I wanted it and, she would want it, it was really hard for the two of us to feel connected. And so that created a huge problem in our relationship for many, many years. And it wasn't, I had a part in it. She had a part in it. But if you've been in a tech job for a long time and it's caused you to overstep the boundaries of the time that you should really be protecting to keep the relationship intact, just so that you can keep up with the demands of your tech job, a person who's in that situation, I will tell you, will only put up with it for so long. And if you stay in that situation for too long, you don't start to do some of the things I'm going to share in a minute here, sometimes you'll find out when it's too late and that person just does not want to keep the relationship going further anymore. So I really want to warn you not to scare you. And I also don't want to say you can't have a healthy relationship and work in tech. I know there's a lot of jokes about that, like it's impossible to find a girlfriend if you're a programmer. I think that's BS. I'm evidence of that. But really take some of this stuff seriously if you want to not just have a relationship or find a relationship, but keep it. The second thing that I think can sabotage a romantic relationship if you want to keep it going is just a complete breakdown in communication. And I think as developers specifically, just people in tech, but especially people that spend a lot of time on computers, the more time we're spending on the computer, the more we're interacting with a machine. And regardless of whether we got, AI and ChatGPT and things today, a machine can only react to you in certain somewhat predictable ways where, when you're talking to a person, you can't control them. You don't know where the relationship's going to go. And that should be hopefully where the excitement with having a relationship with someone is, that they're not you and you get to learn new things from them and you get to see different perspectives. Well, I think as I worked in tech for a really long time, my ability to just communicate started to break down. I would only share with my wife, for example, the minimal information about what was going on with me or what I felt like needed to happen in the family for her to take action. And I didn't even realize, to be honest, I was starting to treat her almost like an employee. And who's going to enjoy a relationship like that? Nobody. So, if you find yourself in a spot where you're having a really hard time communicating with your partner or your spouse, I just recommend, spend some less time on the computer. I'm going to get into some tips that are much more practical beyond that in a minute here. But just consider that the longer time you spend on the computer, you're training yourself to only put up with the types of feedback you can get from a machine, not a person. The third thing I think that can happen that can really damage and sabotage a healthy romantic relationship is financial pressure and lifestyle inflation. Now, what I mean by this is if you're working in tech, at least in first world countries, it can be very lucrative. You can make a lot of money depending on, again, what you do, what area of the world you're in, how long you've been in it, what kind of opportunities you have. And if you're, let's say, providing for another person, in my case, I come from, a pretty traditional family. When I grew up and got married, we had fairly traditional roles, and I provided for my wife and children. And because I provided for my wife and children, the more money I would make, the better kind of their lifestyle, or just let's say the more options they would have. Well, the unfortunate side effect of that is, in the tech industry, it's kind of like a boom and bust industry, meaning we have these periods of a whole bunch of opportunity and tons of new jobs and tons of employment. It's almost like a bubble. And then we have a bust period where, it's harder to find employment and things are kind of contracting. And you probably can see we're kind of in that now. And I want to encourage you too, if you're out there and you're watching this and you're either new to the industry or you've been in it a long time and you're stressed out, this period we're in right now, it's not going to last forever. If you're having a harder time finding work, times change. I've been in this industry again for 26 years and I've seen it boom and bust several times. But if your family is used to a kind of lavish or comfortable lifestyle and suddenly you have to tighten the grip on the amount of money that people can spend. And again, even if you're both working, which wasn't in my situation, my wife worked, but at home, right? She took care of the house, the kids, everything else that was a lot of work that needed to be done. But if you both, let's say, work corporate jobs, you and your partner or your girlfriend or your spouse, if your lifestyle starts to change, it's going to affect the other person. And sometimes that can create a lot of stress. It can create a lot of arguments. And so if you don't have a really good way of communicating about that stress, that can be one of the number one things that can lead to divorce. If you look at statistics on what causes divorce, financial pressure can be one of the number one reasons out there. And if you don't want this to happen to you, I think one of the smart things you can do is when you progress in your career, I've talked about this many times before, don't fall into this rushed mindset that like, I need to make as much money as possible. And if I don't, everything's going to fall apart because you're going to have a crappy relationship. You're going to burn yourself out. This is why I have the career guide I've talked about before. You can grab it. There's a link in the description. But that guide talks about looking at your career kind of more as a marathon and not a sprint, as a way to help you keep going and protect you from burnout. The fourth way I think we can really damage and sabotage a romantic relationship if we've got a tech job is just a lack of shared interests and experiences. Over time, if you're spending a lot of time on the computer, I'll bet you start to get more immersed just in the digital world in general. Meaning if you're a programmer, you're going to be searching stuff on Stack Overflow. You're going to be searching stuff on YouTube. You're going to be using ChatGPT. You probably eventually will, if you don't already, start to maybe play some video games. And if you're not careful, and this is exactly what I experienced, it changes from just I'm on the computer as part of my job to more and more of your life becomes staring at the screen, and this screen taking up all your attention, when there's all these other experiences outside of life that were probably the way that you and your girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, partner initially met. There are people who will meet online, sure, and there's people who will game together. My wife and I played games together the first 10 or 12 years we were together, and then she got to a point she was like, I'm kind of sick of this. But if you can't find things that you can do with your partner where it's a shared experience, you both enjoy it, that's going to lead to, again, that transactional relationship nature that I talked about before, where they just feel like you only want things out of them and you're willing to give them things, in exchange. And it's not really a loving relationship before, where you're just saying, hey, I care about you. I want to do things for you. And they're just saying, I care about you. I want to do things for you. So if you find yourself getting sucked into a really long period of your time and your relationship just distracted by the computer, again, that's one of the biggest things that I will tell you. I almost lost my wife over that twice in my career. I thought I had it dealt with in the first, let's say, 8 years. I had a real panic or crisis moment when I almost lost her because it was just too much time on the computer. I had it happen again 5 or 6 years after that until I really started to take this seriously. And I think you should too. And the fifth thing I think that we can do that can really damage or sabotage a healthy relationship if we're in a tech job is just having really high stress and having that, interfere with our ability to maintain a healthy relationship. If you find that the deadlines that you're, trying to hit, the pressure that you're under is so hard to cope with that you start to lash out in anger at your partner, or you withdraw, this is something I would do, is just avoid her because it was too uncomfortable. I would find too, when I would spend time with her, I would just vent and bitch about work. And I knew that she would put up with it to a point. But rather than that even be a possibility, I thought I was protecting her by, withdrawing and sort of hiding. Also, if you watched my prior episode, I talked about my drug use. And I also just talked about why so many programmers and people in tech jobs can fall into drug abuse if they're really having a hard time, coping with the stresses of the job. But if you continue working in a tech job and you can't find a way to set healthy boundaries with your employer, to stop burning out, to, not fall prey to learning addiction and things, I talked about that in the episode that I did about tech overwhelm. You can go back and listen to that as a podcast or watch that on the channel. But you're going to get yourself into a situation where basically you can't engage anymore with your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your partner. And they're going to start questioning, why am I in this relationship with this person that avoids me all the time? So let's talk about some ways that you can actually make this a good thing. How can you still have a job in tech and still possibly be a programmer, QA, product manager, whatever, DevOps, whatever your position is, but actually maintain a healthy romantic relationship? Well, I think the first thing that you got to do, this is really practical, but I didn't want to do it the first 12 years of our life together, my wife and I. And I'll tell you, it's still a fight to make sure I do it, is to schedule and prioritize quality time together. If you only do things with your partner or again, your romantic interest when you think of it, you're not going to do it very often, because I've talked about this in many episodes of the show. Our job in tech, especially if you're a programmer, has a very high cognitive load. We use a lot of our brain. Well, if we're using most of our brain to solve coding problems and attend silly stand-up meetings and talk about requirements and troubleshoot problems, how sharp and how on your mind do you think your brain is going to be about making sure it keeps on top of that you make time for your partner and you do meaningful things together? So I would tell you what is one of the most important things you can do is, if you can afford it, go out at least once a week. If you can at least go out once a week, that's going to be a big strain on your relationship. There's some current neuroscience that's come out. There's some studies, you can find these if you Google for them, that has shown that really what love truly is between two people that keeps them together, at least, is periods of joy. And if it's been a long time since you've actually spent some time with your partner or your wife or husband where you've experienced real joy about each other in your relationship, you're at danger in your relationship, and you got to find a way to see each other more often. I will share with you when I did not do this with my wife, and it went, almost 6 months at one period before we did anything together outside of the house. I took her out or we did anything. It was just embarrassing and horrible, but it just happened. The first 3 or 4 times that we went out to dinner after that, we just almost immediately got in a fight over just trivial, stupid stuff, because, there was so much distance between us. So I just want to encourage you, if you go to do this and you haven't had that regular rhythm of spending time together, just be prepared. You may have, I hope you don't get into fights, but it may not feel joyful, the first few times you do it, but don't let that stop you from doing it. Because again, the danger is if you don't lean into that, if you don't try to repair the relationship, you're just keeping that person in a worse and a worse spot where they're going to start questioning more and more, why the hell am I in this relationship with this person? What am I getting out of it? Do they even care about me anymore? The second thing that I think we can do that'll really help us maintain or repair our relationship if we work in a tech job and it's getting stressful or we don't want it to get stressful is to communicate really openly about the stress we're experiencing, and also communicate about expectations between the two of you. Now, what I mean by this is, if you are experiencing a really hard project and you go months and months and months and you never let your partner know, that's not a good thing. The flip side is, if every day you're stressed out and every time you see your partner, you vent at them and you bitch at them and you just talk about the project constantly, nobody is going to want to deal with that. But it's just as dangerous. Men especially, we tend to sometimes compartmentalize things. We take, one aspect of our life that's difficult and we just kind of put it on the shelf so that we can get through life. But there's a time to pull that out. So if you're not sharing with your partner that work has been difficult, they don't really know what's really going on with you. And you're really not giving them a chance to see you as vulnerable. And, as men, especially, I think, we take we put a big burden, let's say, on ourselves to try to take responsibility, to stand up, to have fortitude. And I think those are all great attributes. We want to have strength and endurance, but we don't want to be so strong and endurant that we try to pretend we're flawless and perfect. We have to still admit and, tell our partners. And again, even if you're a woman and you're experiencing the same thing, I think, trying to act too perfect. This is the same thing we'll fall into at work. Work is one thing if you're trying to, appear that you're on top of stuff and you got a job and you're getting paid. But in a real relationship, you got to open up to each other. You got to be honest when stuff sucks. Okay. The flip side of this is you also really need to do whatever you can to let your partner know that it's okay for them to share their feelings about how your stress is impacting them. Now, this can be hard, especially, let's say you're on a project that's just really stressful and you've got, a boss or a tech lead or, shareholders, just whoever it is, you feel like they're breathing down your neck. They're really stressed out about the job. And then you go to take a break, you go to make a coffee, or you come home from work, or, whatever, you engage with your partner, you see them again. And they start to tell you that your behavior or just the way you're acting is making them feel bad or making them feel upset or be concerned, or they're concerned about you. I can see why, depending on the situation, that can create an argument, right? And hey, arguments are unavoidable, okay? I hate to be the one to break this to you, but if you want to be in a long-term relationship, I think I can say this safely after 26 years of being with the same woman and 25 years of marriage. Relationship or arguments are inevitable. You're going to get in fights. It's just part of working through stuff. But, if you don't let them know, hey, it's okay if I'm bothering you and you're really feeling like my stress with the job, I'm talking about it too much, would you let me know? Or, I know I'm stressed about this project and you've said it's okay to talk to you about it, but if I start really pissing you off and you just can't deal with it anymore, would you tell me? Because I'd rather have you tell me than not just feel like you have to hold it inside and then now you're stressed and you're feeling anxiety and, you're stewing and carrying it around. So I just think it's really important. Communication is, I will say it, when my wife and I, especially when we both became Christians, when we were able to be more honest about the mistakes we've made, the things that are bothering us about each other, but in a way, in a way of love where we see better in each other and we want to encourage each other and we want to see each other accomplish the goals that we have in life together and not just, bitch at the other one because the other one isn't doing what we want. Having that really open communication and giving the, again, the person that you live with or that you have the relationship with, the safety and setting the expectations that it's okay to let you know that they're pissed off or they're frustrated or they need a break is really important. And the final thing that you can do if you want to establish a really great relationship and still maintain it, in spite of a tech job and all the challenges that we deal with, in the midst of that, is you got to establish healthy boundaries between work and life. The simple one that I talk about all the time is being able to know, when does the workday end and be able to set expectations with your employer. Hey, after 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever time it is, I will not be answering Slack. You could send me a message. I'll check it first thing in the morning, but I'm not going to instantly reply to instant message. I'm not going to watch email. If they want to pay someone to be doing, on-call work, that's one thing. But I think it's really important if you're going to work in tech, especially again, if you're a programmer, if you're a product manager, whatever you're doing, where you're engaging a ton of your brain during the day, you got to have a rest period where you cannot be bothered by the company and you can have your life. If you don't do that, you can't maintain a healthy relationship. It's just going to be impossible. But beyond that, I think the other thing that we don't often think about if we want to maintain a healthy relationship is I think it's important to have work-free discussion times. Things like we agree together when, we have dinner, there's no tech discussion that's going to be made. I'm not going to talk about my project. I'm not going to talk about my job. I'm not going to talk about my boss or my client. When we sit down to dinner together, we're just having dinner and we got to find something to talk about other than that. Or, past, let's say 7 p.m., from 7 p.m. to bedtime, we're not talking at all about work. And the flip side of this is you could even, if you're on a really stressed out project, I've been in this situation, pick a time every day where you're like, hey, could I, since, I really need to get some of the stuff off my chest, could I at least talk to you a little bit about what I'm dealing with work, like a couple times a week, just for an hour, like pick a period of an hour. And I mean, obviously don't just vent at the person. If you really need help to that point and you need someone to just listen to you bitch regularly, get a therapist. Please do not do that to your partner. I have, again, clients that I coach and their relationships get in a lot of trouble. And a lot of times it's because they're treating their partner like a therapist. And trust me, you don't want to do that. But if you do establish healthy boundaries between work and life, so it gives you the time to really have a life again, in time for you and your partner or your spouse or your wife or your husband. And you also decide on specific periods of time when work is not going to enter the conversation. It's not going to be brought up. And you follow some of the other things I mentioned in this episode, I really think you can have a long and great relationship. Nothing's worse than being committed to someone or pretending you're committed or trying to kind of keep the thing going along when both people are unhappy. Or even if just one person, that's all it takes, is just one person being really pissed off about the relationship, and you can be at risk of divorce. But what are you dealing with? Is your relationship having some problems because of your tech job? Are you not even in a relationship because of your tech job? Leave me some comments and let me know about it. Until next time, thanks.